Welcome, everybody, to Zoom Tuesday at the Capitol. Today is Tuesday, March 9th, and it's week 10 of the legislative session. We just had a tremendous and successful Zoom meeting with Hennepin Healthcare and the Minnesota Consortium for Citizens with Disabilities. And since we did that in celebration of March Brain Injury Awareness Month, I'm just going to do a very quick update today on where things are on the legislative session. As I mentioned, it's week 10 of the process. Some people would call this about the halfway point. It's also deadline week. So this coming Friday, March 12th, is the first policy committee deadline, and next Friday, March 19th, is the second policy committee deadline. So I want to spend just a minute to tell you what that means. Essentially, the legislature, as it meets each session, has a series of deadlines where they have to get bills passed in an orderly fashion for things to be considered. And so by setting these deadlines, it basically means that if you want your bills to remain alive, they have to get through their committees by a certain date. And so that first date is coming up this Friday, March 12th. It means that any bill, in order for it to remain alive, has to pass all of its relevant policy committees in at least one body. It doesn't matter if that body is the House or the Senate. It just has to pass all the policy committees in at least one of those bodies. Then essentially your legislation has one more week until the second deadline, which this year will be March 19th, to get through the other body. So if you met the first deadline in the House, your bill has to meet the second deadline in the Senate and vice versa. And if you met it in the Senate first, then you go to the House. So it's sort of a big switcheroo for next week. So this week is a very crazy week where a lot of bills and a lot of organizations and a lot of people are scrambling, including legislators, advocates and lobbyists, to try to make sure that their bills get a hearing in time to stay alive. That is exactly where we are with Cassie's Law. And so we were able to get it through one committee in the House, but it has not yet got a hearing in the final committee. And so we've switched over to the Senate, and we will have a hearing this Friday at 10 a.m. in the Senate Judiciary Committee on Cassie's Law. And if we get it passed out of that committee, then we will have met first deadline in the Senate. And then we will have until next week to get it heard in the House Judiciary Committee. And if assuming that goes successfully, then we will have met second deadline, and our bill will be laid over for possible inclusion in the omnibus bill. There's a whole another set of deadlines coming up that's beyond the scope of today's Zoom to talk about, but you can bet and you can guess that I will be talking about that deadline in future updates. And that, of course, has to do with the setting of the state budget. So all bills that spend money must meet another deadline, the third deadline, which comes up after 3 weeks after the second deadline. So for those of you keeping score, there are three deadlines. First deadline this Friday, second deadline next Friday, and third deadline, which is the money deadline coming up 3 weeks from then. So the other issue that we are tracking right now is, of course, the spinal cord injury, traumatic brain injury research fund that is currently in the higher education budget. We really don't have to worry too much about, we don't have to worry at all about deadlines on the bill in the higher education budget because it's already in the budget. And we want to make sure that it doesn't get taken out of the budget. However, if we do have to go to Plan B, which is to move it from the higher education budget into the Health and Human Services budget, any bills that do that must meet that policy or that finance deadline coming up in a couple of weeks. So stay tuned on that. We're hopeful that the governor's recommendation to cut that funding just simply dies and goes away. That's our plan, is to encourage that higher education committee to not take the governor's recommendations, because after all, that's really all they are, is recommendations. Now, obviously the governor has some power and his recommendations have some power, but it's ultimately up to the legislature to make that decision on whether or not to pass a budget bill that takes that funding away. So stay tuned. We'll keep things rolling along, and I really appreciate your time today. It's a very short update with the deadline coming up. And if you have any questions, please get in touch, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.